It was supposed to be just another normal night. A man driving home in the rain. A janitor finishing up his shift at a quiet school. A nurse checking the empty halls of a building no one wanted to remember. But sometimes, things are waiting for us in the dark. They wait behind locked doors. They wait by the side of the road. They wait in the corners of your eye, where you can almost see them. But you pray you don't. What you're about to hear is not legend. These stories were pulled from police reports, eyewitness accounts, and the last words some people ever shared. A delivery driver who stopped to help a woman who wasn't really there. A janitor who heard music playing in an empty room long after everyone was gone. A nurse who found an old patient's bed perfectly made, even though no one had touched it in 60 years. 3 stories. 3 nights that started like any other, but ended in ways no one can fully explain. You might feel safe right now, sitting in your room, watching this on your screen. Maybe the lights are on. Maybe you're not alone. But before tonight is over, you'll wonder if something is standing just outside the edge of your vision, waiting for you to look away. If you choose to keep watching, remember, these are true accounts. Nothing has been changed, and none of them have been solved. Some say the shadows we see are just tricks of the mind. Others say they're proof that we are never really alone. Tonight, you'll hear all 3 stories, and when it's over, you'll have to decide for yourself what you believe. Stay with us until the end. Most schools get quiet at night. The halls go dark, the lockers stay shut, the floors stop creaking. But in the winter of 1998, a small high school in a rural town didn't stay silent. It was after midnight when the janitor locked up the last hallway. He was ready to go home, but then he heard it. A single piano note, low and cold, drifting out of the music room. He stopped walking. He tried to tell himself it was nothing, maybe a window left open, or the building settling in the cold. But then it happened again. Another note, this time a little higher. Then another, a melody he didn't know, slow and careful, like someone was trying not to wake anybody up. The music room was locked. He had checked it himself. The lights were off. No one was supposed to be inside. But the sound kept going, moving up and down the keys, like invisible hands were feeling their way through an old song. His heart started to pound. He tried to walk away, but something held him there. He said later it felt like the music was calling to him, like it wanted him to listen. When he finally got the courage to look through the glass window, he saw just darkness. But the music didn't stop. It kept playing, soft and steady. In the corner of the room, he thought he saw a shape, like a woman sitting at the piano. But every time he blinked, it was gone. He thought about the stories people told, about the music teacher who died in that room decades before, about how she was found slumped over the keys, her last lesson unfinished. The janitor took out his keys. His hand was shaking so hard he dropped them on the floor. He picked them up, took a deep breath, and unlocked the door. The second the latch clicked, the music stopped. Inside, there was no one, no sound, just the cold. The piano was closed. The air smelled like old books and dust, but on the top of the piano, one of the keys was cracked clean through, like someone had pressed it too hard, over and over again. He tried to forget about it. But the next night, when he walked past the music room, he heard the same melody again. And this time, he decided he was going to record it. The school was old, built in the 1950s. One of those long one-story buildings with tile floors that echoed when you walked. During the day, it was nothing special. Teachers, students, morning announcements. But at night, it changed. The janitor, a man named Ray, had worked there for 7 years. He'd seen things, broken lights, mice in the vents, even once had to chase out a stray dog. But he'd never been scared of the place. Until that week. After what he heard the first night, Ray couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He asked a few of the older staff if they'd ever heard piano music after hours. Most just laughed it off. But one of the assistant teachers didn't laugh. She just looked at him and said, "You heard her, didn't you?" Ray didn't know what to say. She told him the story. That years ago, 1972, maybe 73, a young music teacher had collapsed in that same room during class. Heart failure, they said. She died with her hands on the keys. She was only 28. No husband, no family, just music. And after that, people started hearing things. Some students said they heard someone humming during tests. Others said they saw the piano lid slowly opening on its own, but there was never any proof. Ray didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in facts, but facts didn't explain what he heard. So the next night, he brought a small cassette recorder. Nothing fancy, just something he had lying around at home. He pressed record, placed it on the floor near the music room, and walked away. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then, the notes started again. Soft, careful, one after the other. That same slow melody from before. Ray didn't go in. He stood down the hall staring at the shut door. There were no lights on inside, but the sound was coming clear as day, echoing through the hallway. And then came something else. A second sound. Humming. A woman's voice. Low and calm. Humming along with the melody, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Ray felt like his chest tightened. He said it felt like being watched, even though he was alone. Then suddenly, the music picked up. A few notes faster, sharper. And then, silence. He walked up to the door. He waited. The handle was cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. He slowly turned it. But the door wouldn't budge. That door was never locked from the inside, not in all his years. But that night, it wouldn't open. Then, just as he was about to step away, he heard one last note from the piano. Just one. A high, sharp key that rang out and faded into nothing. The door unlocked by itself. Ray didn't sleep that night. He played back the tape over and over. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The piano was so clear, it sounded like it was in the same room. And under the notes, that humming. A woman's voice, soft as a whisper, carrying the tune. The next day, he thought about quitting, but something kept pulling him back. He told himself he needed to know what was happening. He needed to see it for himself, so on the third night, he came prepared. He brought the recorder again, but this time he held it in his hand. He carried a flashlight. He told himself he wouldn't run, no matter what. He walked the hallway, slow and quiet, listening. The rest of the building was dead silent. No heat kicking on, no creaks in the floor, just stillness. And then it started. One note, then another, the same melody, playing slow and even. Ray's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. But he kept walking. He got to the door and looked through the small glass window. The room was dark, but something was moving. He lifted the flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut across the piano. At first, he thought he was seeing things, but then he realized the keys were pressing down, one by one, like invisible fingers were moving along the keyboard. He froze. He couldn't make himself open the door. He just watched. The keys kept going, pressing and lifting, in perfect rhythm. And then the humming started again. Louder this time. It sounded like the woman was standing right on the other side of the door. The flashlight flickered. For a second, the beam cut out completely. When it came back on, he thought he saw her. A woman in a long skirt, sitting at the piano. Her head bowed low, her hair covering her face. He blinked. She was gone. The keys stopped moving. The room went dead quiet. He stepped back, shaking so bad he almost dropped the recorder. He turned and walked out of the building without locking up. He didn't care. He needed to get out. But before he made it to the parking lot, he heard one last thing. A single note ringing through the hall behind him, like a warning.
Ray didn't go back the next night. He took the recorder home and tried to forget what he'd seen. But the more he listened to that tape, the more he needed answers. A week later, he drove to the town library. He asked the clerk if they had any old newspapers about the school. She didn't even look surprised. She pulled a few boxes out from under the counter and said, "You're not the first one to ask." He sat down and started going through yellowed papers. Most were just stories about concerts and school board meetings. But then he found it. An article dated March 1972. Beloved music teacher found dead over piano. Her name was Eleanor Price. She'd been teaching there for 5 years. They said she had been practicing late into the night, getting ready for a spring recital. The janitor who found her said her hands were resting on the keys, and that there was a melody playing when he walked in. The same melody Ray heard. The newspaper said she died of sudden heart failure. Nothing suspicious, nothing to investigate, but there was a note at the end of the article. Survived by no immediate family. Miss Price's final composition remains unfinished. That night, Ray played the tape again. He realized the melody was repeating over and over, like she was still trying to finish it, like she was still there, waiting for someone to hear her. Ray quit his job 2 weeks later. He said he couldn't keep walking those halls at night, waiting to hear that piano. He packed up his things, turned in his keys, and tried to move on. For a while, he thought maybe he had. But a month after he left, he got a small padded envelope in the mail. No return address, no note inside, just a single cassette tape. He almost threw it out, but curiosity got the better of him. He put it in an old player and pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then the humming started again, soft, right up close to the microphone. And then a voice he'd never heard before. A woman's voice, whispering like she was leaning over his shoulder. She said just 3 words, "Don't stop listening." Then the tape clicked off. People still talk about that music room. Some say it's just a story, something to scare new teachers and students. Others swear they've heard the piano late at night when the building should be locked. In the years after Ray quit, other janitors came and went. A few of them said the same thing, that they'd heard someone humming, that they'd found the piano lid open when it was always kept shut. One man claimed he saw sheet music laid out across the bench, even though the school stopped offering piano classes in the 1980s. A group of paranormal researchers visited in 2004. They spent 1 night recording audio in the hallways. On the tapes, you can hear a woman humming the same melody. No one could explain where the sound came from. Some believe it's what they call a residual haunting, like an old record that keeps playing over and over. A moment trapped in time, stuck because no one was there to finish it. Others think it's something different, something that knows you're listening. There are skeptics who say it was all a hoax, that Ray made it up, that the tape was faked. But if you ask him, he'll still tell you the same thing. That he saw the keys move, that he heard her voice, and that once you've heard the melody, it never really leaves you. What do you think the whisper meant? Was it a warning or an invitation? Tell us what you believe in the comments below. Some halls never really go silent. Even when the lights are off and the doors are locked, something waits in the dark. But the music room isn't the only place that holds on to the past. Our next story takes us far from the quiet hallways of a high school to an isolated house where a family vanished without a trace. A house that still stands empty to this day. And the few who have stepped inside say you can hear footsteps upstairs when no one is there. Stay with us. It was just past midnight when Travis Miller turned his delivery truck onto a narrow road in the middle of nowhere. Rain was coming down so hard he could barely see the lines on the highway. The wipers slapped back and forth, but it didn't help much. He had one last delivery before he could head home. He'd driven that same stretch of road for years. Nothing ever happened out there. No houses, no gas stations, just trees and the river running along the shoulder. But that night, something was different. As he rounded a bend, his headlights picked up a shape on the shoulder. Standing in the rain. At first, he thought it must be another driver who'd broken down. But as he got closer, he saw it was a woman in a long white dress. The fabric clung to her like she'd been standing there for hours. She didn't wave or call out. She just lifted one arm slowly and pointed at his truck. Travis slowed to a crawl. He rolled down his window just a crack. Rain blew in across his face. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" he shouted. She didn't answer, didn't even look up. That's when he noticed her hair. It was plastered to her cheeks and hanging over her eyes, like she was trying to hide her face. He felt a cold rush go down his spine, the kind of feeling you get when you know you're not supposed to be somewhere. He thought about driving on, pretending he hadn't seen her. But something about the way she stood there, soaking wet, made him feel like he couldn't just leave. So he put the truck in park. He turned on the hazard lights, and he stepped out into the rain. That was the moment he would later say when he started to regret ever slowing down. Because when he finally saw her eyes, he knew he had made a terrible mistake. It was the kind of storm that swallowed sound. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain came down in sheets. Travis could barely see her now, even just a few feet away. She still hadn't spoken, just stood there dripping wet. No coat, no shoes, just that thin dress clinging to her like a second skin. "Ma'am?" He tried again, louder this time. Nothing. Then suddenly, she looked up. He said her face was pale, too pale, like she hadn't seen the sun in years. But it was her eyes that froze him in place. They weren't right. They were pitch black. No white, no color. Just solid, wet darkness. For a second, Travis thought it was a trick of the light. A shadow. The rain. Something. But then she smiled. Not wide. Not friendly. Just enough to show she knew he'd seen. And without saying a word, she walked around the front of the truck and opened the passenger door. He said it was like he couldn't stop her. Like he wasn't in control of his own body anymore. She sat down in the seat beside him. Didn't leave a puddle. Didn't even drip. The seat stayed dry. Travis slammed the door shut and locked it. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely grab the steering wheel. Where do you need to go?" he asked. She turned her head toward him slowly. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Not a whisper, not a breath, just silence. The only thing he could hear was the rain pounding on the roof and his own heartbeat hammering in his ears. He thought about getting out of the truck, just running into the trees, leaving her there, but he couldn't move. She was staring straight ahead, like she was watching something out in the dark. Her hair stuck to the side of her face, and those black eyes didn't blink. Travis reached for the radio, but all he got was static. He tried his cell phone, but there was no signal. That's when she finally turned to look at him again. Her mouth opened, slow and careful. This time he heard her voice. It was soft, like someone whispering through a wall. "You shouldn't have stopped." His hands went numb. He felt a cold crawl up the back of his neck. "I'm sorry," he stammered. I didn't mean." But she didn't answer. She lifted one hand and placed it flat on the dash. Her skin looked gray under the dome light. Travis said he watched, unable to look away, as her fingers started to leave long, wet streaks across the plastic, like her touch was burning into it. Then she leaned closer. He could see her face clearly now. Her skin was smooth, too smooth. No lines, no pores, just a blank, cold mask. Her mouth moved again, but the words didn't match the sound. "You shouldn't have stopped," she whispered again. He shut his eyes. He told himself to wake up, to count to 10. But when he opened them, she was still there, watching him with those black, bottomless eyes. And in that moment, he knew this wasn't just some stranger on the road. Whatever she wasn't alive. He doesn't remember blinking. 1 second, she was in the seat beside him. The next, she was gone. Just gone. No sound. No door opening. No cold wind. Just an empty passenger seat. Travis slammed the truck into gear and drove. Fast. He didn't care about the delivery. He just wanted to get off that road. When he made it to the nearest gas station, he jumped out and ran inside. The clerk said he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He didn't say a word. He sat in the bathroom stall for almost an hour before he got the nerve to go back to the truck. When he opened the passenger door, there were scratches. Thin, jagged claw marks running down the inside of the windshield, as if someone or something had been trying to get out. Later that week, Travis tried to find answers. He told a local deputy what he'd seen. The deputy didn't laugh. He just nodded like he'd heard it all before. "You stopped on that bridge, didn't you?" the deputy asked. Travis said yes. The deputy sighed and looked out the window. "They say a woman drowned there, back in '75. Her car went off the road in a flood. Nobody could pull her out in time." "And the eyes?" Travis whispered. The deputy didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "You're not the first. Folks see her sometimes. Always in the rain. Always looking for a ride." Travis asked if anyone knew her name. The deputy shook his head. No one ever knew who she was. And that was it. No records. No missing person reports. Just an old story about a woman with black eyes, still waiting on that dark highway. Travis never drove that route again. He quit the delivery job a month later. He said he'd rather be broke than risk seeing her face one more time. But even after he left, he kept thinking about that night. About how real she looked. How cold the air had felt inside the cab. Some people think he saw what he wanted to see. That maybe he was tired, stressed, half asleep behind the wheel. Others believe the legend is older than he knew. Over the years, local papers ran small stories. Blurbs about drivers who swerved to miss a woman standing in the road. About wrecks that happened in the rain all within a mile of that bridge. A few of those drivers said the same thing, that her eyes were nothing but black. Psychologists call it a shared delusion. The mind under stress can create patterns, make you see things that aren't there. But there were details Travis never read in the papers. Details that matched what other drivers claimed. Like the way she never left footprints. The way her skin looked too smooth, almost like wax. And then there were the scratches on the windshield. The mechanic who replaced the glass said he'd never seen marks like that. Like something had scraped at it from the inside. It was after midnight when she first noticed the red light on the control panel. The old hospital had been closed for years. No patients, no doctors, just empty halls and locked doors. But that night, something tripped the alarm in Wing C. The nurse thought it was a power glitch, or maybe a stray animal had gotten inside. She almost ignored it. Then she looked at the monitor. A single bed, in a room that hadn't been used since the '70s, was lit up on the screen. She leaned closer. The sensors showed movement, person inside. But the records were clear. Every door had been sealed and bolted years before. No one was supposed to be there. She felt a chill spread across her back. As she switched to the next camera, She saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. The bed, room 12, was neatly made. A folded blanket, pillow set just right. But in the logbook on her desk, a patient's file had just reappeared. A file she had never seen before. She picked it up with shaking hands. One word was stamped across the cover in faded ink. Missing. And in the corner, scribbled in red pen, was a note she couldn't stop reading over and over. He was never discharged. That was the moment she understood. Someone or something had come back. The nurse thought about calling her supervisor, but the phones in that wing were dead. She took a flashlight and started down the hall. The beam shook in her hand. Every step felt heavy, like the air was pressing against her chest. The corridor to Wing C was colder than the rest of the building. She could see her breath. When she reached the door, she saw the metal seal still bolted across it. No one had broken in. She checked the control panel again. The motion sensor was still blinking. Patient record still active. She slid her keycard and pulled the door open. Inside, the old lights flickered and buzzed. Peeling paint flaked down like snow. She walked past the first row of empty beds. In the far corner, the last bed was made up like someone had just left it. She stood there waiting for any sound. A cough, a footstep, anything to explain why she felt like she wasn't alone. But there was only silence. Then she noticed the patient chart on the wall. It had a name she didn't recognize. Date of admission, 1958. No date of release. She turned to leave, but the lights flickered again. For a moment, every bulb in the hallway went dark. Then, just as fast, they came back on. She looked up at the security camera mounted in the corner. The red recording light was blinking. Later, when the footage was reviewed, there was only one clear frame before the static took over. A tall figure standing at the foot of the bed. No face, no movement, just standing there like it had been waiting. She didn't see it then. She only felt something cold pass by her shoulder. She swallowed hard and stepped closer to the bed. The sheets were smooth, the pillow fluffed. On the blanket was a small folded piece of paper. She picked it up with trembling hands. The note was written in block letters, the ink smeared and old. I was never gone. As she read the words, the overhead lights buzzed and dimmed again. And somewhere down the hall, a door she knew was locked creaked open. After that night, the nurse couldn't let it go. She started digging through the old archives in the basement. Most of the patient files were crumbling and faded, but she finally found the chart with the same name she'd seen on the wall. According to the record, he had been committed in 1958. No family came to visit. No one signed him out. One day, the staff did their morning rounds, and his bed was empty. They searched the hospital for hours. They never found a trace. The report said he was declared dead in absentia, but the chart was never closed. It stayed active in the system for over 50 years, and the last note entered in the file was a single line: patient status, missing. After she left the job, the nurse thought it was all behind her, but a year later it started again. Late at night, her phone would ring. The caller ID always showed the hospital's number, even though the building had been shut down. When she picked up, there was no voice, just a low crackling sound, like an old radio left on in the dark. Sometimes, before the line went dead, she thought she could hear breathing. The story spread fast among the other staff. Some said it was just a glitch in the old system, a computer error that never got fixed. Others believed it was something else, like the energy of that patient was still there, stuck in the walls. A few called it a tulpa, a thought form that becomes real because people believe in it so much. When investigators looked into the calls, they couldn't trace them. The hospital phone line had been disconnected for years. They pulled old blueprints of the building. The locked wing was sealed after the man disappeared. No other way in or out. Historical photos showed the same ward in the 1960s. Same bed number, same name on the chart. And in the patient records, the last official note was never removed. Patient status, missing. No one ever closed his file. Do you think he ever really left that ward? Or is he still there, just waiting for someone else to find him? Let us know what you believe in the comments below. 3 people, 3 places, all of them vanished, and none of them should have. A locked door that opened on its own. A woman with black eyes who should have never been standing on that road. A piano playing itself in a school long after midnight. These aren't just stories. These are warnings. Warnings that the world we see isn't the only one that exists. So now it's your turn. Which one of these stories stayed with you? Which one kept your eyes open a little longer tonight? Tell us in the comments. And if you've lived through something you can't explain, something you've never talked about, send it to us, because someone else might be living the same nightmare right now. Hit subscribe. And remember, just because it's quiet doesn't mean you're alone.